Lucas was convicted of murdering his mother in 1960 and two others in 1983. He rose to infamy as a claimed serial killer while incarcerated for these crimes when he falsely confessed to approximately 600 other murders to Texas Rangers and other law enforcement officials. Many unsolved cases were closed based on the confessions of the murders officially attributed to Lucas. He was convicted of murdering 11 people and condemned to death for a single case with a then unidentified victim, later identified as Deborah Jackson. An investigation by the Dallas Times-Herald showed that it was impossible for Lucas to have committed many of the murders he confessed to. While the Rangers defended their work, a follow-up investigation by the Attorney General of Texas concluded Lucas was a fabulist who had falsely confessed. Lucas's death sentence was commuted to life in prison in 1998. Lucas later recanted his confessions as a hoax, with the exception of his confession to murdering his mother. Lucas's case damaged the reputation of the Texas Ranger Division, caused a re-evaluation in police techniques, and created greater awareness of the possibility of false confessions. Investigators did not consider that the apparently trivial comforts, such as steak dinners, milkshakes, and access to television in return for confessions to crimes of extreme seriousness, might encourage prisoners such as Lucas, who had little to lose, to make false confessions. Investigators also let Lucas see the case files so he could refresh his memory, making it easy to seemingly demonstrate knowledge of facts that only the perpetrator would know. The police also did not record their interviews, making it impossible to know for sure how much information interviewers gave Lucas unprompted. Henry Lucas was born the youngest of 9 children on August 23rd, 1936, in a one-room log cabin in Blacksburg, Virginia. Lucas's father earned the nickname No Legs after losing both of his legs in a freight train accident. Lucas was quoted as saying, "My daddy didn't do anything. He just sold pencils." When Lucas was 8, he was beaten by his mother about the head with a wooden plank, which caused him to spend 3 days in a coma. Lucas developed an infection in his left eye at the age of 10 when one of his brothers struck him with a knife. His mother ignored the injury for several days until a teacher swiped him over his eye with a steel-tipped ruler and the eyeball burst. It had to be surgically removed and it was replaced with a glass prosthetic. This is not an excuse for someone who murders people, but he had a pretty fucked up childhood. Lucas's mother was a prostitute who would force her son to watch her having sex with her clients. First thing I can remember was when my mom was in bed with another man in the house and she made me watch it, Lucas said. I just couldn't stand there and watch. I had to turn my back and walk out of the house. cross-dress in public so that she could later pimp him out to men and women alike. Eventually, Lucas's school teachers complained about the cross-dressing, and a court order put an end to it. Despite this, his mother continued to abuse and torment him by shooting and killing a mule given to him by an uncle, and proceeding to beat him because she had to pay to have the animal carcass removed. Lucas was frequently bullied as a child, and later cited the mass rejection by his peers as a cause for his misanthropy. Commenting on his childhood, Lucas stated, "I hated all my life. I hated everybody. When I first grew up and can remember, I was dressed as a girl by my mother, and I stayed that way for 2 or 3 years. And after that, I was treated like what I call the dog of the family. I was beaten. I was made to do things no human being would want to do." Lucas's father died of pneumonia after spending the night outside in the cold. While in 6th grade, Lucas dropped out of school and ran away from home, drifting around Virginia. As an adolescent, Lucas began an incestuous sexual relationship with his half-brother and started engaging in bestiality, often capturing small animals and performing sexual acts on them before killing them. On June 10th of 1954, Lucas was convicted on over a dozen counts of burglary in and around Richmond, Virginia, and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He escaped in 1957, was recaptured 3 days later, and was subsequently released on September 2nd of 1959. Lucas claimed to have committed his first homicide in 1951 when he strangled 17-year-old Laura Everline Burnsley. Burnsley disappeared from a bus stop in Lynchburg, Virginia in March of 1951. Lucas confessed to her murder on February 15th of 1984. According to Lucas, he picked her up near Lynchburg, Virginia, and after she refused his sexual advances and resisted an unsuccessful rape attempt, he killed her. He buried her body in a secluded wooded area near Harrisburg, Virginia. "It scared me quite a bit," Lucas said, "because the first girl I killed was when I was 14 years old. I wanted to try the sex I'd been watching. I got to playing too rough with her," he said. "The pressure of seeing my mom hit me, and my emotions more or less took over, and I couldn't quite handle it." As with most of his confessions, Lucas later retracted this claim. Burnsley's body has never been found. In late 1959, Lucas traveled to Tecumseh, Michigan to live with his half-sister, Opal Retta Jennings. Around this time, he was engaged to marry a pen pal, Stella Curtis, with whom he had corresponded while incarcerated. When Lucas's mother, 71-year-old Nellie Viola Lucas, visited him for Christmas, she disapproved of her son's fiancé and insisted he move back to Blacksburg, Virginia, to take care of her as she grew older. No surprises there. I'm willing to bet he wanted no parts of that. When he refused, they argued repeatedly. These arguments escalated until January 11th of 1960, in self-defense. Lucas said, "I've got my gashes in the back of my head. I've got black and blue marks on my body from being beaten every day." Pardon me, guys, good lord. "If I didn't do something she wanted, I got beaten." But his claim was rejected, and he was sentenced to up to 40 years imprisonment in Jackson State Penitentiary in southern Michigan for second-degree murder. Lucas attempted suicide several times by slashing his wrists and stomach with a razor. Henry was then transferred to the Ionia State Hospital, where he was subjected to electric shocks, behavior therapy, and heavy doses of antidepressants. Henry spent 4 years at Ionia State Hospital before returning to prison in 1966, where a social worker met Lucas while he was incarcerated and described him as a very inadequate individual with feelings of insecurity and inferiority. After serving 10 years in prison, he was released on June 3, 1970, due to prison overcrowding. In December of 1971, he was charged and sentenced to 4 or 5 years in prison for attempting to abduct a 15-year-old girl at gunpoint. He was also in violation of his probation by having a handgun in his possession. While serving his sentence for the crime, he established a relationship with a family friend and the widow of cousin Betty Crawford, who had written to him. After being released from prison in August of 1975, he moved to Port Deposit, Maryland, where he married Crawford and moved in with her and her 2 daughters in Pennsylvania on December 5th of 1975 and began working at a mushroom farm. Their marriage ended in 1976 when Betty accused Lucas of molesting her daughters. Lucas then went to Jacksonville, Florida in 1976 and ended up at a soup kitchen where he met Otis Toole, a part-time transvestite, and struck up a friendship with him. In 1978, he moved in with Toole's mother in Springfield, Florida, and became close to Toole's niece, 11-year-old Frida Lorraine Becky Powell, who had a mild intellectual disability and had escaped from a juvenile detention center. A period of stability followed, with Lucas and Toole working together in a roofing company between 1979 and 1981. According to Lucas, during this time, they engaged in a multi-state killing spree in which they targeted hitchhikers, sex workers, and migrants. He also claimed that Toole enjoyed crucifying their victims, then barbecuing and eating them. After their arrest, they were caught discussing cannibalism over a prison phone. "Remember how I like to pour some of blood out of them?" Toole asked Lucas. "Some tastes like real meat when it's got barbecue sauce on it." Powell would also occasionally travel with the men as well and may have even helped Lucas and Toole lure potential victims. When interviewed about his crime spree, Lucas stated, "I killed him every way there was except poison. There's been strangulations, there's been knifings, there's been shootings, there's been hit and runs. I didn't have any emotions. On January 20th of 1982, Lucas convinced Powell to run away with him to avoid child welfare authorities, and they lived on the road, eventually traveling to California, where an employer's wife asked them to work for her infirm mother, 82-year-old Kate Ridge. 3 weeks later, Kate Ridge went missing, and so did Lucas and Powell. Apparently, her relatives had called him out for not holding up his end of the bargain, accusing them of failing to do their jobs and writing checks on Ridge's bank account. While hitchhiking, Lucas and Powell were picked up by the minister of a Pentecostal religious commune called the House of Prayer, located in Stoneburg, Texas. Believing Lucas and the 15-year-old Powell were a married couple, the minister found Lucas a job as a roofer, while allowing the couple to stay in a small apartment on the commune, where they even attended church services. However, Powell became argumentative and homesick for Florida. When she turned up absent, Lucas claimed that she left at a truck stop in Bowie, Texas. On June 10th of 1983, Lucas was arrested on charges of unlawful possession of a firearm by Texas Ranger Bill Ryan. While in jail, he wrote a letter to the sheriff. "I have killed for the past 10 years, and no one will believe me. I cannot go on doing this. I also killed the only girl I ever loved." Later, he confessed to the murders of Powell and Ridge and led the police to the perpetrated remains, although forensic evidence alone was inconclusive and the coroner stopped short of positively identifying either of them. Lucas claimed he had lured Powell to an isolated field in Denton, Texas, on August 23rd, 1982, stabbed her in the chest, engaged in necrophilia with her corpse, dismembered, decapitated her post-mortem, and scattered her body in pieces. In Ringgold, Texas, on September 16th of 1982, he reportedly lured Ridge to join him in a search for Becky on a camping ground. He then stabbed her in the chest, carved an inverted cross on her chest post-mortem, and engaged in necrophilia with her corpse before stuffing her body into a drainage pipe. Lucas's participation in the investigation would serve to boost his credibility in later confessions to other crimes. Lucas later denied involvement, but the consensus is that he did murder Powell and Ridge. In November of 1983, Lucas was transferred to a jail in Williamson County, Texas. He reported that he attempted suicide after receiving rough treatment by the inmates, and claimed the police stripped him naked, denied him cigarettes and bedding, held him in a cold cell, mutilated his genitalia, and did not allow him to contact an attorney. After 4 days in jail, Lucas pleaded guilty to the 2 murders of Powell and Ridge in court, but then also claimed to have committed over 100 additional murders. In interviews with law enforcement personnel, Lucas confessed to numerous additional unsolved killings. It was thought that there was positive corroboration with Lucas's confessions in 28 unsolved murders. So the Lucas Task Force was established by James B. Adams, the director unsolved homicides as a result of Lucas's confessions. Lucas received preferential treatment that was extremely lax for someone supposedly thought to be a mass murderer. He was frequently taken to restaurants and cafes, rarely handcuffed, allowed to wander police stations and jails, and he even knew the codes for security doors. Later attempts at determining Lucas's involvement in his confessed crimes were complicated when it was discovered he had been given access to information in the files of cases he was confessing to. There were suggestions that the interview tapes showed that Lucas would read the reactions of those interviewing him and alter what he was saying, thereby making his confessions more consistent with facts known to law enforcement. Sorry guys, my allergies are out of control and my nose is so itchy. My apologies. Journalist Hugh Ainsworth and others investigated the veracity of Lucas's claims for articles that appeared in the Dallas Times-Herald. They calculated that Lucas would have to use his 13-year-old Ford station wagon to cover 11,000 miles in 1 month to have committed the crimes police attributed to him. After the story appeared in April of 1985 and revealed the flawed methods of the task force, law enforcement opinion began to turn against their claims that the crimes had been solved. The bulk of the Lucas report was devoted to a detailed timeline of Lucas's claimed murders. The report compared his claims to reliable, verifiable sources for his whereabouts. The results often contradicted his confessions, thus casting doubt on his participation in most of the crimes he had confessed to. Texas Attorney General Jim Maddox wrote that when Lucas was confessing to hundreds of murders, those with custody of Lucas did nothing to bring an end to this hoax. We have found information that would lead us to believe that some officials cleared cases just to get them off the books. Lucas's case damaged the reputation of the Texas Ranger Division, caused a reevaluation in police techniques, and created greater awareness of the possibility of false confessions. Investigators did not consider that the apparently trivial comforts, such as steak dinners, milkshakes, and access to television in return for confessions to crimes of extreme seriousness, might encourage prisoners such as Lucas, who had little to lose, to make false confessions. Investigators also let Lucas see the case files so he could refresh his memory, making it easy to seemingly demonstrate knowledge of facts that only the perpetrator would know. The police also did not record their interviews, making it impossible to know for sure how much information interviewers accidentally gave Lucas unprompted. Lucas was ultimately convicted of 11 homicides, including those of his mother, along with Powell and Rich. He had been sentenced to death for one and then unidentified woman, dubbed as Orange Socks, whose body was found in Williamson County on Halloween 1979, despite a timesheet recording his presence at work in Jacksonville, Florida on that day. Lucas was granted a stay on his death sentence deer stand where the murder took place. Ain't no way he could have guessed that, and I damn sure didn't tell him. I think he did that one. Other rangers had similar experiences with Lucas. In total, Lucas was convicted of 11 murders, including the deaths of his mother, Becky Powell, and Kate Rich. The 8 other victims that Lucas was convicted of murder for are as follows. 26-year-old schoolteacher Linda Jane Phillips. Sorry, folks. There goes one of the regulars that roars their fucking piece of shit car down the street. Anyway, that was distracting. My apologies. Let me start that again. 26-year-old schoolteacher Linda Jane Phillips disappeared on August 8th of 1970 in the Dallas suburb of Richardson, Texas, while returning from a party to her parents' home in Kaufman County. Her mutilated body was found on August 10th. She sustained 26 stab wounds and had been sexually abused. Lucas confessed to the murder and claimed he forced Phillips' car off the road at about 2:30 a.m. Lucas then allegedly forced her into his car at gunpoint, made her disrobe, and then stabbed her in the throat, chest, and stomach. The body of patrolman Clemmy Everett Curtis, age 30, was found on August 3rd of 1976, handcuffed near his patrol car in a wooded area just outside of the Huntington, West Virginia city limit. He had been shot through the chest once. Lucas confessed that he and Toole had killed Curtis. Lily Pearl Darty, age 18, accepted a ride with Lucas on November 11th of 1977 at a gas station in Harrison County and was later sexually assaulted and shot in the head. Her decomposing body was found 3 weeks later in a wooded area north of Marshall, Texas. 23-year-old Deborah Louise Jackson, informally known as Orange Socks, was unidentified and is believed to have been murdered on October 30th or 31st of 1979 in Georgetown, Texas. Her body was found naked except for the pair of orange socks from which the nickname was derived. She had been strangled and was believed to have died only hours before the discovery. On April 26th of 1981, Lucas allegedly broke into the apartment of 17-year-old babysitter Diana Lynn Bryant in Brownfield, Texas, with the intent of robbing it. He then took a knife he carried to cut loose the cord on a vacuum cleaner and used it to strangle Bryant. Diana's father was satisfied with Lucas's confession, and the case was closed. Glenna Faye Biggers, 65, was found by a neighbor on December 20th, 1982, in Hale County, Texas. A butcher knife had been thrust into her stomach and a fork into her throat. According to Lucas, he broke into her home, killed her, and then stole $180. Laura Marie Purchase, age 26, was discovered on March 17th of 1983, dead in a burning wooded area near League Line Road in Montgomery County, Texas. cases in which they are both seen as viable suspects are as follows. On June 27th of 1977, detectives responded to a wooded area off Old Union Church Road outside of Townsend, Delaware, after the remains of 50-year-old Marie Petrieiser were discovered in an open field. She had suffered blunt force trauma to her head and had fought back against her assailant. Lucas lived in Elkton, Maryland at the time, near to where Heiser's remains were found. Investigators also found that writings Lucas made had many similarities to the crime scene. 45-year-old Stella Ellen McLean disappeared from a restaurant in Scottsbluff, Nebraska on February 7th of 1978. On April 15th of that year, her headless body was discovered near Interstate 25 in Platte County, Wyoming. She had been raped and strangled. Her head was never recovered. In September of 1984, Jim Larson, an investigator for the Scottsbluff County Sheriff's Department in Nebraska, questioned Lucas about Stella's murder. Larson asked deceptive questions to test Lucas, but apparently Lucas offered compelling testimony to support his claims of killing McLean. 40-year-old Janet Lee Callies was last seen at the Sandbar, a bar near Interstate 80 in Grand Island, Nebraska, on November 15th of 1978. In 1984, Lucas confessed to her murder and stated that he and Toole had strangled her and buried her body somewhere between the north edge of Grand Island and the South Dakota border. Lucas managed to recall personal details about her, such as how she had 3 children. 19-year-old Cheryl Ann Shearer was last seen working her shift at the Rhodes Pump Your Own station, self-service gas station. That was a mouthful, people. In Scott County, Missouri, on April 17th of 1979 at 11:45 a.m. Toole and Lucas both admitted to authorities that they had killed and abducted a young woman nearby about the time that she had vanished. She was the only girl reported missing in the region at the time, despite Lucas's claims to the contrary when police showed him a photo of her. Even though it was proved that Toole's niece and nephew, as well as Lucas and Toole, were present in Scott City, Missouri at the time of Shearer's disappearance, there was never enough evidence to bring charges against them. A highway worker discovered the body of an unidentified woman on October 29th of 1981 in Iola, Texas. Her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The victim, known as the Grimes County Jane Doe, was also wrapped in a plastic bag. Lucas confessed to her murder, stating that he drove the victim to the area from Durham, North Carolina, and claiming that her name may have been Cheryl. He then strangled her while Toole beat her in the head with a tire iron. He was able to lead police to the area in which her body had previously been found. Wow, guys. So, some serious case we have there. Clearly he didn't murder 600 people. It would have been physically impossible. But convicted of 11 and probably committed a lot more than that. Another absolute Virginia. I don't know what to tell you guys. Wild. It's a wild place. My sincerest apologies for mispronouncing any names of persons or cities, towns, etc. I do my best. As a reminder, I'm dyslexic and I will fuck shit up a lot, so thank you for bearing with me. I am so